There.
Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting and fun episode of The Quick Draw with me, Mike, your host, formerly known as the owner of Young Guns. With me is also my co-host, John. We're gonna have a fun, exciting talk about immigration today. I'm looking real forward to it with our guest today. Before we do, I hope you guys don't mind. I actually do want to do a little bit of a rant before we get into our topic and introduce our guest, because I just watched Black Panther, and holy God, like I can't get over. I'm really butthurt about this movie. Like I cannot get over how bad this movie was, or poorly done it was. Like I'm really upset. It's just like, John, you said you haven't seen it, right?
I've seen enough reviews that I may as well have seen it. But yes, I haven't seen the movie. I have it, but I saw Infinity War, and so now it's hard to take a step back to watch a movie I know is inferior.
I mean, watch it because continuity and all that stuff. But
right.
There's so many things in the movie that I'm, from start to finish, I'm just like, who the fuck wrote this? Like,
obviously not.
This is lazy. Well, it's funny too because the whole thing was like Wakanda forever. It's black and power. I'm like, this was written by a white guy. I don't care how many black people were in the movie. This was clearly written by a trust fund, lily white guilt liberal guy, and I'm just like,
no question.
You've got these magic space rocks. Magic space rocks were supposed to catapult African tribes thousands of years into the future.
Never mind how.
Never mind. Yeah, like, okay, how did they figure out how to smelt the ore? Like, who implanted in the mind of these tribes, hey, we can take this shiny purple rock and make like cloaking technology out of it? It's like, that's not how this works, guys.
Not to mention, it's a metal that absorbs all kinetic energy. So basically, any tools at the time to work with it would not have worked. So how exactly?
Oh my God, I didn't even think of that until just now. Yeah, like you're gonna hammer the shit out of that and then blow yourself up. Like,
right.
What the hell?
You need advanced tools to even work the metal in the first place. So it's like.
Well, and then there's like we've got a whole mountain of this stuff. This stuff came from a meteor. Like, if you've got a whole mountain of meteors smashing into the planet, guess what? That's an extinction level event right there. That's the dinosaurs. Bye-bye. Like, they're talking about, yes, and it changed the wildlife and the animal life and the plant life around it. Like, really? By change, do you mean it wiped it the fuck out?
Like eradicated. But so.
And it's like, okay, you've got this technology, you've got this magic technology that you magically figured out. Good for you. You've been sitting in a dark hole for the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, and you just kind of let slavery happen. And we're the colonizers? We're the problem? Like, come on.
Like you could have done, not to mention other Africans enslaving each other. You know full well that if this were real, that they would have just enslaved Africa on their own. Because the thing is, you have to remember, this is what Africans did at the time anyway. You can't tell me these people were any different. Right. Just because they had new technology, it doesn't mean they were culturally any different.
Like, I'm just like watching this whole thing, and I'm like, okay. There were times when I kind of wanted to side with the bad guy, Killmonger, because at least what he was offering made sense. Like, okay, you're pissed off about the plight of black people. You've got like laser spears. Yeah, I can see you wanting a little bit of payback. Like, I get that, but the whole problem is his entire motivation is like, you killed my dad. You killed my dad. I'm like, dude, you were a black kid in Oakland. You're lucky you even had a dad. Like, come on. Like, stop your bitching. You at least have enough of a dad and memories with your dad to mourn. Like, most black kids in Oakland, they don't even get that. So, I mean, come on.
It's a good number. It's like honestly.
Silver linings here, kid. Like, look on the bright side. So, that might have been a bit too far with that joke.
No, I don't think so. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Anyway, let's go back to immigration. So our guest tonight, really smart guy, one of my favorite follows on Twitter. He recently had a bit of a shootout between him and Alex Norrath. I don't know I can't say his last name, but he's one of the fellows at CATO Institute. Wrote a white paper about immigration and about how immigrants supposedly don't vote a certain way when you give them the vote. Turns out that that's not entirely true, and our guest tonight actually used the white papers in a very lengthy debate to demonstrate that. So we decided to have him on the show. We wanted to have a debate, but Alex pussed out, for lack of a better term. So please join me in welcoming at Morlock P, also known as Travis. Travis, welcome to the show.
Great, thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to have you. I have to say, I enjoyed the exchange probably more than is healthy. And I'm going to be honest. Like my take on immigration is not as hawkish as most conservatives. Like I actually am okay with immigration reform that tightens border security, but loosens the restrictions on who can and can't come here. My philosophy is, look, if you're not, as long as you don't have some kind of disease, as you know, physical or mental, so no communists, then come. If you pay a fee and come in,
you and I are on a real similar page. And this was part of the conversation, or the failure conversation that I was having with Alex. He said, okay, someone is disagreeing with me about immigration. Obviously, I know what this other person is thinking. He is this mouth-breathing troglodyte who doesn't get along with anyone who's not the exact same Pantone of skin color he is. He hates Hispanics and blacks. So I'm like, dude, I've dated a Mexican woman. My best friend growing up was Indian. None of this is true. I'm just responding to your white paper.
Hey, that's racist.
Right. Yes.
Why do they call it white papers? Why they couldn't call it black papers? What's up with that?
The printing doesn't show up as well in black paper.
You have to write it in white out, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a lot of ink. Like if you're trying, can you imagine some social justice warrior just like trying to justify, using white print on black paper? Like it's like, okay, your inkjet cartridge is gone in like half a second.
You can't even make a joke in the year 2018. Like I'm sure we can hear the list. It has been argued that white paper is oppressive. So. There's a lot of things about immigration, and you were bringing up one of them, which is one can be critical of the current immigration system, which is terrible. These people who are Sarah Hoyt is a science fiction author, and I think she used the phrase Americans who weren't born here. And there's people born in every culture, every race, every continent who have the same values that we have. They just want to work hard, raise a family. They love free speech. They love freedom. And I think it would be great for all of us and for them to find these people, bring them here, and make them part of our tribe, our culture. But we also have to think about there's other things. If you look at support for, say, Sharia in the Middle East, it's 50, 60, 70%. Well, if we bring those people here, certainly there's some people there. There's people who are free thinkers who don't fit into that system, and maybe we should bring them here.
Ali comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a friend who is Nigerian, and he's more American than most Americans, so I'm very glad that he's living out here. But to say that all immigration is awesome is not necessarily true. I mean, if we have somebody who has a terrible incurable disease that's going to end up on our welfare rolls, if we've got somebody who has a low IQ, if we've got somebody who wants to come over here so that they can help conquer North America for Islam, there's a whole host of things that we don't want. So disaggregation is next to godliness. We don't need to say all immigration is good, and we shouldn't say all immigration is bad. We should say, hey, let's find the people who would fit in here, who would work well with us, and work with them.
Yeah, and that makes absolute sense. Like you want to, and I think that's the real challenge in immigration. A few years back, I came up with like a 7-point plan. John's familiar with it. That I think would fix immigration, would simplify it. And I like sharing it with conservative and liberals because I get positive feedback as well as pushback from both sides. And I've come to realize like the real challenge of immigration, I think, is kind of that filter that you're alluding to. Like, okay, there are people we want in this country. There are people we don't want in this country. How do we filter them? Because I think you and I agree. It's certain things would be a stupid filter, right? Like skin color. That doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely retarded.
But other things that do make sense are actually really challenging. Like, how do you allow, people from the Middle East who want to come to this country to escape the sectarianism and the violence of their country? How do you separate those Middle Easterners from the Middle Easterners who say, "Oh yeah, no, you get along very well."
Oh, but anyway, and the problem is, I think the whole discussion tends to get sidetracked because half the people in the argument like literally racism has nothing to do with this issue. It's totally irrelevant. But we have people who literally think, like you said, there's people you don't want people who think all immigration is bad or all immigration is good. But you've got the left that not only says all immigration is good, but anyone who says anything different from that, whether no matter what it is, you must just hate brown people and whatever. You know, that's basically their way of looking at it. They don't even bother to listen to
John the face of all our immigration ideas, so that anytime somebody says those ideas are racist, we'll be like, no, they're not.
See, the problem is that every time that happens, and I just get called the Uncle Tom race traitor that apparently, you know, the House needs or whatever. So I'm sorry, I can't say it the way they actually say it because I'm pretty sure YouTube would flag it. But still, you know, they actually the so-called N-word that everyone's
sure they flagged it. Black joke.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I was gonna say you never know.
Fortunately, it was a bit too far even for me.
I got it. It's still true, but the thing is that we're not monetized. I think that's the only saving grace we have. Like usually we'll demonetize it. Ha! Can't do it. We don't make any money off this anyway.
Yes. Get the fuck out of here with that negativity, John.
I said not now. Okay. At the moment, we're not monetized, so
we'll have to clean up the swearing before we get monetized. Is my understanding.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Ah, so see, my mom gets her wish anyway.
Yep.
So it was a running thing. My mom was always like bothered by the language. So if you want to get monetized, she gets her wish anyway. but
yeah, I mean, and what I thought was interesting is one of the points that you brought up, Travis, was a really good point. And this is something that I've observed personally, because my wife is Hispanic. She is from South America, so we have a lot of exposure and contact to members of the Hispanic community, both legal and illegal. And what I've noticed, my wife and I observed, and it annoys the hell out of us. My wife in particular hates it when she sees it. But what you'll see is first generation immigrants who come to this country and get their citizenship will have a very positive attitude towards America. They'll have a very positive outlook. They'll be very informed about the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and the history of this country. Sometimes even more so than some like native-born Americans.
Oh yeah, quite common.
But then their kids are born,
right?
And I swear to God, you want to slap those little shits around. Like, I mean, they're like, I'm Mexican American. No, you're not. You're a fucking Chicano. You were born here, dude. Shut the hell up. You're not Mexican.
And
put that fucking flag away.
The problem is the degree to which the Marxists have won the long march through the institutions. You know,
right.
They own the universities. You know, the vast majority of elementary and high school teachers aren't Marxist per se, but they absorb. You know, they're watching TV news, which is sort of idiotic and left wing. They go to their 3 or 4 days a year of training taught by some university teacher to keep up on current things. And so they just, sort of drift slowly left in the Overton window. And so, a kid who's Hispanic, going to public school, his dad, swam 90 miles from Cuba and, kisses the American soil. He's so happy to be here. They go to school and they keep getting tracked into this sort of direction. The prevailing wind is pushing the ship to the left. Then they go to the college, first generation in my family to ever go to college. And, the Hispanic Student Association, sees them and says, oh, you're one of us. Let's bitch and moan about the white man and how he ruined everything, and on and on and on.
So shows a profound ignorance of history, really.
Oh, absolutely.
And I was going to say, here's the thing: is one thing you mentioned about the K through 12 teachers. You have to remember, most of them are unionized, and the unions do have that view, whether or not the teachers do. And so that's why teachers who don't have that view, the unions usually will not stand behind them much. So that's why your teachers tend to be Marxist, because the unions are. And so that means they'll filter out non-Marxist teachers. And it is rather funny to watch because it tells you what a failure they are at teaching history, because they want to claim that, especially Mexicans. I actually wrote about this back before I knew what Tumblr was. And I used to say, is it a little ironic to anybody that Mexicans of all people are arguing about white imperialism? It's like, what are you descended from?
Right.
What language do you speak? It's Spanish. You know that Spaniards are white, right? That's where they came from.
I think if you mix them on it, they're going to say, we're indigenous peoples of America. Like, well, the indigenous people of America are on average the 5'3", very, very dark-skinned ones. And if you're in the U.S. as a proud Chicano, you're probably 90% Spanish.
Well, and that was the reason I bring that up is because that was one of the things in the white papers that Alex supposedly was like, no, see, like these immigrants, they trend the same way Americans, and it's like, no, they don't. And look, it says in your white paper, not only do they not trend that way, but their kids trend worse in the one direction they do go. It's like it gets progressively worse with each generation up to
and Alex's point was, okay, the first generation is kind of bad, and the second generation is bad, and the third generation, sure, I'll acknowledge it's kind of bad, but by the fourth generation or whatever it was something like third or fourth, it's not too much than Native Americans. I'm like, well, all right, so first,
great. So we only have 3 generations of shitty policies we voted for. Great.
Exactly. In 100 years, we've got 100 years of voting to pull us left. And then when 100 years is done, we've got people who are only 10% more Democrat than
right.
So like that's more than enough to win every election.
Right. Right.
But I want to know, but this brings up a good point, because what I want to know then is like, is there a nation or a culture out there? So I think that's another thing that's where this is just an uphill battle no matter what we do. Is there a culture or a nation out there that actually feels the way conservatives do about natural rights, about the Constitution, about freedom and liberty and limited government? Because I feel like that's something you will find on an individual basis, no matter irrespective of culture. But I don't think there's no European nation that I know that thinks like that. There's no South American nation. Maybe Chile, but Chile vacillates back and forth. Chile goes from being like the United States of South America one day, and then to being like communist, almost as communist as they were under Allende before the Golpe another day. And there's just like, can you guys make up your fucking minds, please? Because I would like to annex Chile for my wife. That would be a wonderful present when I'm elected president. Just, honey, here, look what I did for you. Chile is free forever.
Oh god, that'd be terrible. Right. I was gonna say we already tried that. I think we're trying to do that with Puerto Rico. That's not working out so well.
Now, so another problem that Alex had with his 4 generations is that's a particular time series, and he's generalizing it. So what Alex is saying is, okay, look at these Germans, German Americans who showed up in 1900, and the first generation did this, and the second generation did that, and the third generation did this. We do not have 4 generations. Sure, there's little data points, but in general, we do not have a big cohort of, say, Syrian Americans dating back to 1900, or Kenyan Americans that immigrated. So it's instructive. It's interesting to look at how Germans or French or Russian Americans over 4 generations did, but that doesn't necessarily tell us what Somali Americans are going to do, or Iraqi Americans. Now, they very well might. And we're getting back to the disaggregation thing. I'm sure that there's 5% of Iraq that would skim off the top, or 15% of Persians from Iran who would love to be here. The religious freedom, the freedom of speech, and they'd instantly be great Americans, and their kids would be, and their grandkids would be. But that is an intelligent policy, and it's not the same as the CATO policy of throw open the doors. It's a huge party, and you're all invited.
So that's interesting, because I didn't know that. So he's basically taking data from one demographic.
Yeah,
and he's
implicitly based on who is a 4th generation American in 2018. Yeah.
Plus, you have to consider that. Look at Iraq actually as one good example, because that's the one country where the U.S. came in basically and gave them a clean slate to work with, where we said, okay, because this tells us something about what the majority of the country is like.
And it failed.
We gave them literally, let's wipe out the government you've got. You pick what government you get, and they pick something more or less the same as what we just got rid of. The thing is that's why it's a problem when you ship lots of people. Again, Europe knows this, but they don't want to admit it. Look at the fact that literally Sweden is drowning in rapes, and they're like, nothing's happening here, nothing to see. There's nothing. Nope. What are you talking about? Nope, not happening. And it's like people get to the point where it's like, when the only people left who are actually advocating that, people raping our people's kind of bad or racist. And people start voting for the racists, and then they're like, oh my God, it's because you're racist. No, it's because we don't want to get raped. And those are the only people who actually acknowledge it's happening. But the thing is just, that's it, is that you can see what most of those countries are like by the fact that when given the option to pick their own government, they pick the same stuff. So the thing is that at some point you have to admit that no, the culture of a lot of the Middle East tends towards the same things.
There's a really good point made here in the live chat too that I really like. The point is, this is from Tots. The point is whether the people want to be Americans, in quotes, or if they only want to live in America geographically with no culture change. I think that hits the nail on the head. Like,
absolutely.
Like,
yeah,
I think a good filter philosophically or ideologically is the Declaration of Independence. Like I've said this for years, if you believe in the Declaration of Independence, if you read the words on in the Declaration of Independence, and you're like, I agree with that. That is truth. I love it. I want to live in a country that believes that. I don't care where you're from. I don't care if you've gone through the process. You're American as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Right. Whereas I don't care if you were born here. Right. You read the Declaration of Independence and your first says, it was written by a bunch of old white slave owners. It doesn't have any relevance today. Get the fuck out. I don't want you here. Go away.
Or we could just like lock you onto the campus of Evergreen State, maybe. Just like put you there and leave you there forever. That would also work. But, you know, and that's the sad thing, is just that you can't have the proper discussion because half the people involved in the discussion don't want to have it. I really think that we're not having much of a discussion, because every time we try to have it, again, like I said earlier, we're just having talks about how, it's white people who don't like. Do you realize that like if you look at the border with Mexico, most of those little towns on the right on the edge that are in the U.S., but on the border there, most of those towns are Hispanic. Most of the people that we're trying to protect are the very people that we're supposedly racist against, and it's really rather frustrating, because what ends up happening, I think, is that you start getting to the point where there are people on our side of the argument who say, you know what, screw it. If you're going to tell me that I'm racist, I may as well just go ahead and say, you know what, I just don't want anybody anymore. Nobody. Let's just shut it all off. Because that's basically what Trump is. Trump kind of is the guy who's like, let's just cut it all off then. Since we can't figure out, and since everyone wants to say that everyone who wants any kind of restrictions are racist, well, let's just put all of them. Let's just restrict everything.
I almost would be on board with that. I think like a moratorium on immigration, just until we like clean house and like figure some shit out. But I worry that sets a really bad precedent.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a precedent because we've more or less done it before.
Okay.
And this is another problem that we have with sort of Marxists in the current year. Trump will pass a law, let's say, reducing
the Muslim ban. The Muslim ban. He banned all the Muslims.
Trump would pass a law on anything.
Come on.
Trump could put a 25-cent tax on sneakers, and this would be an unprecedented, never before seen in America, attack on individual liberty, blah, blah, blah.
Which is ridiculous.
Because over the last 18 months, they've not seen this before. And then you could pull out, these are 4 taxes that Obama put on sneakers and 17 more that Clinton. And there's this wide-eyed, let's change the topic. People have no history. We're 220 years old. We've done a lot of things.
Speaking of that, have you seen the pictures, the collective media freak out over the 2014 pictures of children in cages?
That was so hilarious, because
that was the biggest self-own in the history of media.
My favorite was the double own when one of the journalists said, I didn't realize that these were from Obama. I never would have tweeted them if that was the case. Like, Jesus, you admitted the game.
That's like, you're not helping yourself here.
Right,
what's funny?
Right. You're taking the hole deeper.
I have hit rock bottom. I am going to keep digging. That will work.
It's like, throw out the shovel. Let me get a jackhammer here real quick. But because the thing is, because I remember I wrote something at the time. It was something real short, but I remember writing a thing about where they were being used as political theater. The idea was we're basically it's like, taking a child and it's like, hanging them over a lava pit and being like, well, if you don't do what I want, I may have to drop this child. And if they do, well, it's up to you. And I guess that's a problem. It's your fault if the child goes in the lava. You better do what I want. That's basically what they did. Is they said, okay, let's actually ask for people to send kids up here. And then we're going to keep them in these detention facilities. Because, again, they got caught on that count. Because people, I know at least a few people with some government connections that figured out, no, they were asking for these kids. They were literally escorting them up here. And then say, okay, look at the poor kids. They're stuck in these detention facilities. It's Republicans who won't do anything to get them out. It's like, and who put them in there?
I tweeted
National Lampoon magazine, buy this magazine. magazine or would shoot the dog. You know,
Yeah.
they lined up the dog, they got the gun, and they said, you know, Trump made us do this.
Well, and this was something that I tweeted out in response to this whole like media cell phone was, so when conservatives, high-profile conservatives like Senator Ted Cruz and Glenn Beck go to the border with toys and food and blankets to help take care of these illegal immigrant children, that, yeah, like you said, John, the left is corralling them up here, right? And it doesn't matter to the left that these kids are being sent up here with no parental supervision, that a lot of them are being subjected to sexual abuse and rape and dehydration and starvation, right? These kids are going through hell, right? And the left doesn't care. They're like, no, send them up here because, you know, we need the political props. And you have these high-profile conservatives like Glenn Beck and Senator Ted Cruz and others saying, you know what, these kids got to go back, but in the meantime, we're going to give them a place to stay. We're going to give them food. We're going to give them toys. We're going to make their brief stay here as pleasant as possible. You don't hear about it at all. The only media that covers it is the conservative media, right? And the conservative and conservatives were divided over whether or not that was the right thing to do or not. Right. Which understandably there would cause some contention there. Not a peep from the left. They don't give a shit. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, Trump lost 1,500 kids. This is so horrible. Look at these kids in cages. That's from Obama. Oh, never mind.
Never mind. It's not important anymore. No, because again, to remember back from 2008, Evan Thomas's words, you know, that Obama's sort of a god, and of course, gods, you know, they don't make mistakes. But you know, it's just. It's one of the more frustrating topics. Like I said, I think probably the only topic I find more frustrating than this one is gun control. But this one is one where, and like you said, there's no sense of history. Like literally Obama, again, the travel ban that Trump put in place is pretty much a mirror of one that Obama already put in place. The very countries he picked were countries Obama already put on a list. He just took the same list and said, okay, we're going to temporarily. Now, I agree that, yes, a temporary travel ban for 90 days. Now, what the hell was that going to do? Nothing. But the thing is that the point is that it's a Muslim ban. It's like you do realize like some of the largest Islamic nations in the world were not on that list. And this ban was temporary. For someone who's banning Muslims for 90 days, yes, that shows how utterly racist he is, that he just hates Muslims so much that for a full 3 months, they're not going to be able to come here. Some of them.
I think the sort of middle 80% of the left gets their information from MSNBC and watches Rachel Maddow, and they hear this and like, oh my God, it's all true. It's so terrible. But the top 10% is just sort of deeply cynical and understands the game. Like, oh, we know it's not a Muslim ban. We know exactly where these countries came from. And it's just sort of a deeply cynical propaganda move that, you know, this will motivate the base. This will get them marching. This will get them donating to all of the little left-wing magazines. This will get them voting and doing, you know, my God, have you guys read Moldbug?
No.
Sounds familiar.
Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Sort of the source of the neo-reactionary movement. He's the smart guy out in San Francisco who wrote this blog. And, you know, having read Moldbug, he had this one story about, he read some book that was about the media covering Vietnam, a retrospective. And he said, you know, he'd read all of these books by media figures on Vietnam, and they didn't quite make sense. Like things were going this way, then suddenly they changed and the news coverage got this other way. And so the American public got disgruntled. And then eventually reading this, this other book, looking at how the media did its job, he realized, oh my gosh, the first story I was reading was missing 70% of the facts. And he said, you know, it's as if there was a poltergeist. You know, plates are flying around the room and breaking for no reason. And then we realized that the guy who wrote that story was the one picking up the plates and breaking them, and then airbrushed himself out of the story. And so when you look at politics today, you know, it's the same thing. That, you know, oh my God, there's a Muslim ban, and the 10% of the story we don't see is this is a very carefully coordinated set of talking points that go out on email. You know, we all know about Giorno List, this mail serve that, you know, hundreds of journalists. And you know, once you become aware and become sufficiently cynical, you can just see, you know, the New York Times and CNN and this news outlet and that news outlet, they all hammer on the same issue, you know, each day in coordination. So yeah, that's the Muslim ban. Deeply cynical.
What's amazing about
you know what's funny is if you think about their reaction for like 2 seconds, right? So Trump comes in and says, "Look, guys, we need to restrict immigration for a brief moment of time from these 7 countries because there's problems here."
Yeah,
and they freak out, and they freak out, and it's like, okay, wait, let's think about this for a second. If it's not that bad over there, what's the big deal?
Right.
Like it's the same thing. It's like the same thing with the shithole countries comment and left like clutching pearls over shithole countries. It's like if they're not shithole countries, what's the big deal? They can't come over here for a few months. Like they can just wait it out. Life, just live in Middle Eastern paradise over there, and no big deal. Like, what are you worried about?
Right,
you guys think,
exactly.
You guys don't think America's the greatest country ever. You don't think those are shithole countries, supposedly. So, What's the rush to get people over here? Like, I don't.
The error that you're making, and is that you're. is that you're approaching this analytically and intelligently. You're saying, this left-wing person made an argument. Left-wing person, let me interrupt you and explain the mathematical error. There's, you're saying if A is equal to 3 and also equal to 4 at the same time, it doesn't work that way. Like, talk about this intelligently. This is propaganda generated to motivate the 103 IQ, school teachers and anti-nuclear grandmothers marching and, moms demand action and I've got pink sneakers. These people do not, they're not fueled by intellectual arguments. They're fueled by their feelings.
And of course, Antifa now also, we have to kind of throw them into the mix because the thing is that now not only do you have to deal with the rhetorical problems, because again, I was just talking to a guy about this recently, where he's saying that if people are fascist, shouldn't they be attacked? Shouldn't Antifa get on them? It's like, first of all, we don't know that the people you're calling fascists are that, but now at this point, because this whole topic is tied to that. If you put out propaganda that says it's fascist, he's trying to keep out people because of their race, well, what do you think Antifa is going to do? And then later, when they do it, you're going to then go back and say, well, it doesn't matter because it says anti-fascist right in their name. So clearly whoever they're attacking must be fascist. I mean, let's just not work.
I'm going to do the exact same thing that I was accusing you of, a flaw, which is if you talk to these people, you say, okay, now why is it that you're allowed to hit these people with bike locks? And they say, well, because they're fascists. And I say, okay, now, did they go to court? Did you prove they're fascist? No, I can just tell. Okay, now pause for a second.
It's like pornography. You know it when you see it.
now, I interact on the fringes with some of these sort of terrible right-wing borderline Nazis, and they'll defend every single police shooting as a good shoot. And like, well, how can you tell it's a good shoot? I mean, it sure looked to me like that cop shot the black dude in the back. Well, he was a car thief. You can just tell. Like,
yeah, I just have the same basic idea of how to do this.
I don't want to delegate the decision to inflict, physical harm to some idiot cop, and I also don't want to delegate it to some idiot grad student with a U-lock. We want slow, deliberative processes that balance things. So, no one gets to go and decide on their own that someone is a fascist and hit them with a lock.
I love turning that one around though, because the guy was actually the argument's still going on Twitter. I'm sure he'll respond by tomorrow morning, but. Is to say, okay,
that guy. He was
like, okay. I said, okay, why do you think it's good to hit fascists? Because I said, if someone wants to speak and say something stupid, then let them. Because he's like, well, if you let them talk, then people will just they'll just glom onto it and it'll gain traction. And I was like, yeah, where? But then I said, okay, look, you're saying so.
That's why I interjected. I said, guys, only leftists are that stupid. To where somebody just says something and they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Right.
We need that meme right now. The guy, oh.
But then what I said was, okay, wait a second. So what you're saying is the reason why it's okay to hit fascists is not because I said you should only hurt someone if they are directly advocating violence. He said, well, no, they will advocate violence eventually if we let them speak. So I said, okay, if that's true, I said, if that's true, shouldn't I also exercise force against you? Because you are also advocating force against somebody. It doesn't matter who it is. The point is you're advocating violence somewhere. So shouldn't I therefore be, I haven't heard anything back yet, but I'm sure I will by tomorrow morning. But the thing is just, but that's the idea is like, I can advocate violence because I don't like what you're saying because I'm sure that what you're saying will lead to violence sooner or later. then you're basically and you're doing the same thing.
Yeah, what's funny is they will actually say, and then with a straight face, because I think we're talking about the same person, because somebody tried to make the argument that stupid people, right, come up with these reactionary ideas, and it's a sign that you don't have, that you're ignorant about what's going on, and they were making references to like the right and how like the alt-right and so on, it's evidence that they're stupid. I'm like, okay, this works both ways. Like Antifa, punch a Nazi, like these are reactionary things. Like,
right, exactly.
Are you saying that the left is equally stupid as the alt-right? Gee, that's never occurred to intelligent conservatives anywhere. Like, and they're like, that's, and he actually responds with like, you think that punching a Nazi is reactionary? I'm like, yes! And you're talking about people that aren't Nazis? Yes! It absolutely is reactionary. This is horrible. Do you like the Reichstag fire? Because this is how you get the Reichstag fire, okay?
The same people will first defend, punching Nazis, and then define Nazi as anyone who is, in favor of actual judicial trials instead of sort of kangaroo courts on campuses, or
right.
Or as they like to say, the double jeopardy loophole. Have you seen that one yet?
Oh God, that's terrible.
I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's called the Fifth Amendment. I don't know if it's a loophole per se.
Well, I mean, there's the hate speech loophole, right? That's the First Amendment, and the gun show loophole, that's the Second Amendment.
Right. Oh my God, I'm feeling bad here. This is horrible.
There are loopholes for everything, dear God.
Every Bill of Rights, every amendment in the Bill of Rights.
It's a loophole. Yeah,
it's a loophole. The quartering of troops in peacetime loophole. Like, God, this is horrible. Like, how warped do you have to be though to see like the world that way? Like, where everything, the legal protections of your right are loopholes. Like, that doesn't.
Right.
It's
we need to close these loopholes.
Those tricky, evil white supremacists, they figured it all out. Like,
well,
they knew that if they just put into law a system of rights for everyone, they'd win.
Yep, that's how that works exactly. That's why Asians are doing so well, because obviously it was written to benefit them, of course, So, but and when it comes to
I swear, our followers and our audience are some of the strangest folks.
I have to be honest, though. Immigration is just one more of a piece. So if there's one thing that I have noticed over the years, because like my being involved in like the general debate over these sorts of things has been, it's like, a decade and a half old, right? So like, thing is, I have to be honest, I feel like if you removed the left entirely from these discussions, you wouldn't lose really any diversity of ideas, because from the center to the right, there's already a robust diversity of thoughts, but also people who are decent enough to actually have debates with people, like reasonable people. Then you have the left where, yeah, you're adding new ideas to the mix, but the ideas are, there are not allowed to be other ideas other than our own. So it's like, so basically,
I would love for the conversation in America to be right versus right. Like, I would love for the conversation to be like conservatives versus libertarians, and not conservatives versus progressives. Because if you think about it, like, if progressivism is your counterweight, right, then every time you bend or give, conservatives have to give something up. Progressives always get what they want. They might get it in inches instead of miles, but they get what they want. Right. Whereas, like, if it was conservatives versus libertarians, like, if I as a conservative give up something to the libertarians, well, I usually as an exchange get more freedom. Right. Worst case scenario, the libertarians win, and I get a scenario where I have to deal with the problems of too much freedom as opposed to too little.
Right.
I can live with that. Like, I won't be happy. I won't agree with them on everything, but I can live with that.
And conversely, I'm a sort of social conservative who's a libertarian. I live in New Hampshire, for God's sake. And
Dear God.
it's true, except in January. But anyway, you know, as a libertarian, you know, if I lose to the conservatives, it's, you know, hey, I'd like to have 0 taxes on everything, but conservatives say that, you know, gambling or pornography or something is bad for families. So, and, you know, I would agree with those things. But so let's say the conservatives win. At least the encroachment on liberties is sort of a small one. And, you know, I could think, hey, maybe we can roll this back. Whereas when you deal with the left, they are, you know, geniuses at the tactics of this. So they will do things like, hey, we need to unionize. And the naive approach is, okay, they've got a union. We can, you know, swing the pendulum back. Maybe we can recover. But of course, they're very, very clever. The union is taking dues. The dues pay for democratic things.
Right.
You know, they unionize the teachers. It's not just a teachers union that you're now hoping to roll back. They are indoctrinating the children at this point.
Right.
So every time you lose to the leftists, it's not a pendulum swing where you can hope to get it back. They're undercutting the fundamental rules of the game. So, you know, if we lose to immigration, it's not something that, oh, in 20 years, maybe we fix the immigration thing.
No.
You're fiddling. Is everything okay?
No, I think
Like,
so.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I'm muted. So if we lose on the immigration issue, the concern is, you know, we might import 50 million Marxists over the next 30 years, and you know, and then we lose absolutely everything, even in a fair election.
Right, and this is why other issues have gotten to this point. Because, like, for instance, I have actually not been quite as hardline on the Second Amendment as I am now. Like, I didn't used to be. Like, I've always been pro Second Amendment, but I haven't been as much of a hardliner as I am now, because I have learned very quickly the left is only looking for inches as a foothold to take a mile. And
yes, yes, very well said.
See, because like you were saying about the conversation between libertarians and conservatives, if a libertarian makes a reasoned argument, like they have on drugs, look at what Ben Shapiro has said recently. He's kind of let go. If you make a reasoned argument from a libertarian to a conservative will be like, okay, hang on. I have to reevaluate now because you made an argument I can't refute. Whereas a leftist will just say it's not about the argument. I just think it should be this way and shut the hell up. And so it's like, you know, so it's like you have to.
And you're racist.
Right. And then what I love is that you're a racist idiot who hates everybody, hates women, hates that. No, I don't understand why you won't vote for me. If you hate Trump so much, why won't you vote Democrat? Yeah, why won't I vote for the party that thinks that I'm an idiot racist who hates women and basically wants to destroy the planet? Why wouldn't I do that? I can't imagine. But you know, and so the thing is just I say that, look, you know, again, I bring up the gun control thing because I've had like 50 billion gun control debates on Facebook in the last like 3 days. But like you know, where someone's like, we're just trying to be reasonable and our points are non-negotiable and you just won't go along. And it's like, because first of all, your definition of reasonable doesn't make any actual sense. And two, you're saying basically, I'm saying, because he said basically outright, I think that murders are because of gun ownership. I think that you are the gateway to murdering children. Now you should agree with me.
Oh, by the way, donate your tax money to Planned Parenthood.
Right, exactly.
Killing children upsets us so much.
Right, you know, unless they can make the argument like that one girl who's trying to argue, I'm a biologist, and I say that children in the womb are not children at all. That solves that problem. And it's like, you know, but that's just it, is you're dealing with people you can't give an inch to. And that's why, like Mike was saying, when I see debates between conservatives and libertarians and people that are centrist, you know, like Dave Rubin, who's basically kind of the guy who, you know, chafes himself to straddle the fence. But I like Dave Rubin because if you hit him with facts, he will actually consider that. He can be reasonable. He can be reasoned with. And the thing is that, to me, if you just take everyone from center to right, you have a more robust discussion than you have with leftists involved. If you booted leftists entirely from every discussion on every issue, I think actually things would get better. You'd actually be able to have discussion.
Well, that's why I say, like, I would love for the debate on any topic to be right versus right.
Right, or I guess
because
center right to right.
No, I know more of the center right crap because I'm tired of moderates who are really just leftists in sheep's clothing.
Well, if you have no leftists, then the moderates are less of a problem. I guess the reason moderates are a problem is because they give too much ground to leftists.
Everything left of Hayek needs to go. Okay.
I like it.
I want the left of Friedman because I think Friedman was a little more center right than Hayek was. But whatever, you know, you get the idea. Like, it's just everything left of those guys.
Just toss it out. I mean,
send them to Venezuela. They like socialism.
Right, send them off to socialist countries. I see no reason why they can't.
Travis, I do want to ask you this. So I have, like I mentioned earlier in the show, I came up with a 7-point plan. I want to ask you I'm gonna break it down real quick.
Great.
I want like a agree or disagree on each point. Okay. So point number 1, secure the border. And by that, I'm not a big fan of a wall. I'm not a big fan of a wall, but I am absolutely okay with like military doing live fire practice drills on how to capture.
Here's why you need a wall. Here's why you need a wall.
All right,
it is a shelling point. Once you build it, it's there. This is the exact same reason that leftists are always pushing for light rail, even though buses are better. They understand the truth that once you get it locked into the infrastructure, it becomes the new null hypothesis that there is an assumed continuation of the wall.
Becomes the default, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so in other words, once the wall's there, then it's kind of the mindset is, we got to pay to upkeep it and monitor it.
It takes a physical act to tear it down. It just becomes the standard.
Right. I see your point.
But I mean, at the same time, though, they could just like stop. They could just walk away from the wall, and then border hoppers would just jump.
Yeah. I think obviously you need a wall, and you need troops on the wall. But anyway,
and just carpet bomb the border every now and then. Random carpet bombing of the border. Like, just put a sign in English and Spanish that says, "Look, guys, every now and then we just blow shit up. So, cross at your own peril." Or we could just annex everything south of the border to Panama. Because Panama Canal is the small border, and then we can just build a wall on that thing, and I'm happy with that. Because that's a lot easier and cheaper. Okay, but we agree then on securing the border. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so second point. Mandatory verification by all employers. So bring back E-Verify.
Yep.
They have to verify all employees at time of hiring. And if you don't verify, there's a fine. And if not, and in not verifying, you get an illegal immigrant, the fine is worse.
Your policy is a pragmatic one. I'm going to push back on it. So, I mentioned before, I'm a social con and a libertarian. So I'm always torn on these things. My thought is that...
so you would be conflicted in my ideal society.
Yes.
Maybe a bit schizophrenic. Like, we should totally do that. No, we shouldn't. Shut up!
I mean, for the humor, yes, absolutely, you nailed me. If I can depart from humor for 10 seconds, I would say that a libertarian society allows people to be virtuous and socially conservative on their own. It doesn't force them to do it. So anyway, getting to E-Verify and such. I, as an American citizen, or just as a person born with rights given to me, by the Creator, should not have to ask the government's permission before I can go over to my neighbor's yard and split firewood for him. Nor should, a guy born one town over has to ask the government's permission. And if we look at the Constitution, which is a good thing, and leftists hate doing it, if we look at Article 1, Section 8, there's 13 bullet points there. Probably not bullet points. They're enumerated with numbers. These are the things that the federal government is allowed to do, and they're pretty short. And I actually had an epiphany in college when I went off and read the Constitution for the first time. And I read Article 1, Section 8, these 13 points, and then I read the 9th and 10th Amendment, which say, if it's not in that list, the government can't do it. And then I was like, this is amazing. Most 95% of things that the government does are not on that list.
Right. Yeah.
And this was an amazing moment. And then I started reading up on FDR and how, basically the American Republic, Ben Franklin said, what kind of government have we given you? A republic, if you can keep it. We didn't keep it. It disappeared in the 1930s, and it was sort of illegally usurped by the socialist state that we live under now.
I said a little earlier, actually. But
What's interesting about this is, you bring up an interesting point. I'm going on a tangent here, but in the 1930s and 40s, the socialists, especially like the Nazis and the communists, would point to FDR's New Deal, and they called it fascist. So the Marxists love to bash FDR as a fascist, and they didn't point to internment camps to make the case. They pointed to the New Deal.
There are some left libertarians that I quite like. The science fiction author Ken MacLeod is the sort of communist libertarian. Is a really interesting guy, and he sees the Soviet Union as this fascist left corporatist state. You know, it was fascism with a red flag.
So that's where they're getting that from.
And I wrote an article about this for Halsey News. Like, I think one of the things that conservatives should start doing is to help with the narrative of fascism and communism and anti-fascism and all that. We need to start talking about the roots of fascism and where it actually came from. Fascism is socialism with property rights, like with very, very restricted property rights. In other words, you can own property, but you can only use it the way the government tells you.
Right.
It's socialism, though. Like the whole goal, Mussolini's whole goal was like, I like socialism, but it takes too long to get the end result that I want. So
and not internationalist socialism. It should be
international. He had the nationalist chauvinism that the communists didn't want.
And you know, amusingly, the big debate in the early Soviet Union was sort of international communism first or communism in one country first. And the end result that we ended up getting by 1945 or so was effectively per country Marxism, which was Mussolini style, fascism.
You're pushing back. You're pushing back on point two because it's not fair to businesses then to force. I'll be honest.
No. That's a poor way to phrase it. It's not that it's not fair to businesses. It's that the federal government does not have the authority. We, the people, have not delegated that authority to the federal government.
Well, what did you? And I'll be honest here. When I wrote that, I was thinking of like a business, like an actual brick and mortar type business, hiring someone. I hadn't even thought of hiring my neighbor down the street to cut the lawn. How would you verify that? So that's a good.
But even brick and mortar. I mean, I've been a business owner. I've had a business that I started from scratch in my basement and grew it to 15 or 18 people and doing a couple $1 million a year. I wish I'd put some of that in my own pocket because I ended up walking away with like $3. But the point is, it's pretty simple to build in your mind. Oh, there's a difference. When I hire a kid to mow the lawn, that's one case. But when a business does a thing, that's another case. Even if that business has 50 employees or 100 or 300, it's still just people with rights doing it. And Mitt Romney got a load of crap for saying businesses are people, and the left intentionally misinterpreted this as saying see he's saying that businesses have all of the rights of people. And that's not what Mitt was saying. Mitt was saying the business is just a legal framework whereby a bunch of people come together and work for a common cause. So I would say that if the three of us after the show decide to start a small comic book store or something,
that sounds fun.
That we should not. The government does not have the authority to make us jump through hoops and bend to its whim.
Well, now, couldn't you argue, because the government does have the authority to set up rules for naturalization and immigration, couldn't you argue then that Congress has the right to make a law that says, look, and I almost wonder if that would fit under a little bit of interstate commerce as well. You could say, look,
the exact way you phrased it is, couldn't you argue? And absolutely, that's how 99% of the lawyers in America would argue. Oh, it's absolutely.
I have been told that I should be a lawyer many times in my life.
I mean, I called myself earlier a libertarian, and that's true. But I'm out at the extreme of anarcho-capitalist. So anyway, right. I'm persnickety on question 2. Let's.
All right, persnickety is a good way to put it. Point 3. So point 3 would be simplify. I say abolish the immigration code as we have it today.
It's terrible.
And then replace it with a very simple process. Right? You want to come to this country? Cool. Pay us a fee just to apply. There's no guarantee you get in. All right. So you're paying for the privilege to be considered.
Right. Like applying to college.
Yeah. We will do a background check on you. We will profile you. We will psychologically profile you to determine whether you are, hiding any communist or terrorist inclinations.
Right.
And we will also do a medical check. So as long as you're disease-free, commie-free, terrorist-free, violent drug cartel-free, as long as you have no ties to any violent revolutionary institutions, as long as you're drug-free, or not drug-free, disease-free, you can pay the fee again, and we will let you come to this country. You can stay for 3 years. At 3 years, you got to go through the whole process. You just got to pay your fee again. So every 3 years, you pay your fees. You got to let us know where you are, and I lost my train of thought. And after 12 years, So after you paying the fees 4 times, basically, you can apply for citizenship.
Yeah, I think that's a great plan. And let me say, I don't think it's the only good plan. There's the famous William F. Buckley quote about, I'd rather be ruled by 500 random people from the Boston phone book than by 500 people from the staff of Harvard University.
Right.
In the same way, the current system is so terrible that if we pulled out sort of Dungeons and Dragons books and got a bunch of D20s and rolled up a plan, the first roll says you have to be over the age of 31, and the second roll says that your income has to be between $40,000 and $61,000. Random arbitrary crap. That system would still be better than what we have in our system.
I would make it interesting.
Well, no, what's funny is I shared this plan with a liberal friend of mine that we had as a guest on the show. And she actually pushed back on this because she was challenging me. She wasn't. I don't think she had a problem with the point. I think she was just trying to get me to understand, like, realistically, that point doesn't. You don't just wave your hand and it magically fix the immigration problem. So I'll pose the question to you that she posed to me: how do we justify simplifying the code, and how do we because supposedly there's a rationale for all those complexities. I personally think that the rationale is, yeah, trade union or labor unions are racist and didn't want brown people coming in and driving them out the market. But
we have them.
Yeah, my reasoning for getting rid of the complexities. Part of the reason why people come here legally is because they can't afford an immigration lawyer to navigate all that bullshit.
Absolutely. So this is quite interesting. You're familiar with the concept of Chesterton's fence? Chesterton was this Catholic conservative writer earlier.
J.K. Chesterton.
Yeah, exactly. I know the name. And so Chesterton's fence is sort of a modern liberal is walking down a country road, and there's a fence across it. And he looks at it and says, I can't immediately think why this fence must be here. So I can't think of a good reason. Let's tear it down. And
I have a friend who references that a lot.
I know this one. Yep.
Or don't know. There might be a cliff 30 feet over, just around the curve, and so we don't want cars going off it. There might be bulls. That this could be a livestock pasture. If you don't know why, you should assume that by default that there's a good reason. So this is how I argue in general about should we change the laws about marriage? Well, those laws have been more or less the same for thousands of years. Let's not rush into this. There might be good reasons. Should we change the laws about private property and all live in communes? Well, most societies have not done that for thousands of years. Let's not be rash. And yet when it comes to this, I'm going to jump to the rash side and say the vast majority of legislation and regulations by our government are huge reeking piles of crap. And without understanding why they're there, I think it's a good idea to burn most of them down.
Not to mention, you just mentioned that the things that we're not rash about have been around for thousands of years. The things we're talking about in immigration have been around for what, 10? It was like,
yeah, exactly right. Ted Kennedy's 1965 immigration reform, which is very much a play for Democratic voters.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a really good point. That's one of the reasons why I prefer. People talk about term limits for lawmakers. I'm like, no, that won't fix the problem. What you need are term limits for laws. Let's amend the Constitution so that every 5 to 20 years, laws just phase out. Now you have to start over.
I've come up with that idea myself. The problem is anytime you come up with a reform, you have to think, well, we've got all of these forces, these political forces, these forces of personality, et cetera, who are the ones who built today's problems. How would they respond to this? And if you ever watch C-SPAN and you see stuff on the floor, there's this thing that people say, which is, I would like unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. And what this means is that they get to take the transcript that was taken down and shred it and hand in for the permanent record their prepared speech. And this is a pro forma thing, and everyone wants that to go through. So, the entire committee or whatever raises their hands and say aye, knowing that when they come in, and give a speech in a month or so and have ums and ahs and distractions, they will ask for unanimous consent to revise and extend their remarks, and they'll get it in return. So I love this idea. I'd love to have a constitutional amendment tomorrow that every law sunsets in 5 years. But I also think that within a year or two of this happening, what we would have is every January 1st, someone would propose, I'd like unanimous consent to reenact all of the laws that are expiring today. And that
I've had that issue brought up, and my only solution at this time is to say, okay, include in the amendment that you can't do that.
So wait, I was going to say, because otherwise,
no omnibus bills to renew shit.
So
Okay.
wait, it wouldn't have to go for a vote. Like it would just have to actually.
No, they could do like
that.
what he's suggesting is they could do like an omnibus bill. They could say, okay, we've got 50 laws that are about to expire. We're just going to pass one law that renews all of them. And
yeah, this is
that won't be up for consideration. Hopefully, the president would say, "I'm going to veto that law. Fuck you guys."
Well, this is where Mark Levin's idea to actually have an anti-omnibus amendment to the Constitution would be kind of helpful. But you know,
right. So back to immigration. Okay, so point 4. So point 4 deals with illegal immigrants. So we're going to say, all right, look, if you're here in this country illegally already, all right, we're going to be merciful, but we're also going to exact justice. So here's what we'll do. You have 1 year to turn yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
You have to pay. You have to go through the whole process that I outlined in point 3. Okay. On top of that, you also have to serve a sentence, either jail time or community service. You take your pick. Okay. And if you fail to turn yourself in that year, or if you fail the background check in any way, shape, or form, bye.
Mm-hmm. I am not a fan of this one. And again, it is because as conservative, or let me ask, as a conservative, do you think that in general government does things well? Are you happy with the RMV? And are you happy to have the same people who run the RMV running your medical care under Obamacare? And your answer is?
No,
of course not.
Right, of course not. So now my question is, how well run are the jails, and how well run do you think the community service is? You know, and we both know jails are terrible, and the community service would be a joke. It would have all of the wrong incentives. It would be dominated by, whether we want it or not, sort of quasi-Marxist career bureaucrats. I don't know exactly how it would go wrong, but I know that government is involved, so it would go wrong.
So you just say, so send them all back and then let them go through the process.
I don't know. Okay. It is a lot easier to critique your ideas than it is to generate my own on the fly.
That's a fair point. Okay.
At least you're honest.
And I also do include in this, like, once these reforms are enacted, if you ever come into this country illegally, and this is actually this is the 7th point. We'll get to that in a second. You actually, there is an actual penalty that involves jail time, and then you get to court. So, all right. So, point 5 is for anyone who wants to come here, right? If you are coming here as a STEM graduate, you're gonna study a STEM career, right? Or you have a STEM degree. As long as you stay in this country, you cannot leave for a certain amount of time. I say 9 months, but I go on that. You cannot leave for more than like 9 consecutive months, for example. And I came up with 9 because I was like, okay, what if you're like a pregnant woman, you can't travel or something like that? Okay. If you come here as a STEM student or STEM career, you don't have to pay the fees, right? You still have to pass the background check. You still have to go through the rigmarole, but you don't have to pay the fees. You can stay here fee free as long as you don't leave. If you leave, we're going to charge you when you come back. If you are non-STEM degree, like 4-year degree, we'll let you pay less of a fee. Or if you are like a non-4-year, but it's anything STEM, but it's not 4-year degree, then the same thing. You pay a reduced fee. So the idea behind this, okay, we want the best and the brightest to come here.
You know, I think your heart is in the right place, and we agree in spirit on this sort of thing. And to back up, the spirit here is clearly we want productive, useful people, and we don't want, sort of low skill, low intelligence people. And I'm a STEM person myself. I'm a software engineer. One need only look around to see that, hey, on average, STEM generates a lot more value, is much better compensated than, whatever, English or something. But that having been said, we're again sort of putting the government in the position of looking at credentials. And when you look at credentials, what you're doing is privileging those who create the credentials. So what you've just said is, hey, I really like university administrators, and I like the power that universities have to confer magical baubles on people. And, you know, we both know that the universities are entirely Marxist dominated. So this seems like a really bad idea to me. And we also look at some people who created immense amounts of value. You know, the Steve Jobs, you know, Steve Wozniak, STEM, did great work. Steve Jobs, I think he didn't even graduate college, but he took a calligraphy class. You know, in that calligraphy class, he is said inspired him to think about design, which was a huge contribution. So likewise, you know, I think that lawyers can create a huge amount of value by defending the innocent or striking down onerous government laws. I think that someone with an undergraduate in, you know, English who then goes on to get an MBA and start a company, or someone who does not get an MBA but goes on to start a company. You know, there are people out there who dropped out of high school and then create huge amounts of value. But so the spirit, I like the spirit of what you're getting at, which is somehow let's get people who are going to contribute to America. The implementation I'd want to think about more.
Okay, cool. So then we'll say that one's up in the air.
Sure.
So point 6, if you once everything's implemented, right, we will create special buffer zones. What is the term I use? But let's call them what they are: detainment facilities. Okay, separate from.
This is going to end up with, okay, actually they're prison camps.
They're prison camps. Let's admit this. They're prison camps. All right, but they are prison camps separate from the general population of criminals. I do not want illegal immigrants mixing with violent criminals, American otherwise. The idea being here, okay, if you come into this country illegally, you go to jail in these little prison camps, which can also double. The idea is they would also double as. I'm actually mixing points 6 and 7 here just to save time. So point 6 and 7 is we make these refugee camps / prison camps that you can put illegal immigrants in. They'll do manual labor. They'll hang out there for 6 to 18 months at a time, depending on how many times we've caught them trying to come into this country illegally. And then we deport them if they're an illegal immigrant. If they're refugees, we say, look, you just hang out here until we can vet you, like really vet you. And then if you pass the vetting, we'll give you the option to immigrate into the States if that's what you want, or we'll send you back home if that's what you want. We'll send you back home whenever you want. That's the idea. And the idea too is that these are self-sustaining. You know, like I say, when I say manual labor, I mean farming, textile, like stuff that they can produce on their own, right? So that's self-sustaining. And then any surplus we can store for, emergency refugee purposes.
I know it's funny because
I have a feeling you're going to bring up the RMB.
Yes, right.
Again,
Like 10 minutes ago, we're bitching about Mussolini and economies and how this is terrible, and it's really the second.
And I know this is a potential to go really, really wrong.
But I get the idea.
I kind of see it as a compromise. I see it as a really hard compromise between, hey, this. I came up with the 7th point, which was the refugee camp during the whole Syrian thing, because we're like, we got to let the refugees in. I'm like, that's not a good idea. Well, let's send them back. I'm like, that kind of sucks too. Like, there's really no good solution here. We come out
the solution I had to the Syrian
unless it's
refugee
internment
thing.
camps.
The solution I had to the refugee thing is Greece has got a huge currency problem or a current accounts problem, and they need money. We should buy a Greek island or two off of the Greek government, and we, the international community, and then we should settle all of the refugees there, and drop in food and water and nurses and everything, because the left, of course, never lets a crisis go to waste. It's a famous quote by I think Rahm Emanuel. And what they're saying, really, and we can all see the tactics here is, ooh, these poor people, we have to help them, and they're going to be voters, or their kids will be voters, because once you get them in the West, they're never going to go home. They know that.
Oh dear God, no! Who would want to?
And I see that, and that's the thing is and I'll admit here, this was a bit of a compromise on my part, and I'm not 100% sold on my own idea. The thought process here is, look, these people are going to come here anyway, one way or another, thanks to the left. Let's at least control it and take and protect our citizens and our residents from potential terrorists. And also, let's control the narrative. Hey, no, these fuckers didn't help you. We helped you. Okay. And yeah, you may not have liked it because, you know, we made you work, but, you know, it was that or get bombed, you know,
beheaded.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, for the Syrian thing, my thought is you could argue, and I would agree with this, that, you know, Christians have an obligation to help their neighbors and blah, blah, blah. And in general, charity is good. So that's why, as you say, we don't want to send these people, you know, at bayonet point back into a war zone. That's terrible behavior. But on the other hand, we don't necessarily want to change our own culture by bringing in, you know, 10 million Muslims. And we don't know what % of them are, you know, moderates and apostates who want to join America. And what percent are just, you know, hey, you know, welfare and German bitches. Wonderful. You know, so that's why an island is a good thing. Similarly, you're saying, oh, when there are illegal immigrants, let's do this complicated 73-step Mussolini-inspired plan where they're here on our land. And I'm thinking, this sounds bad. Surely we can find an island somewhere, or we can just.
I do like. No, I hadn't thought of the island idea. I do like the island idea. I absolutely am. Like, Alcatraz isn't being used right now, is it?
Right. This is too close. We need to buy a Greek island, or
I like the Greek island idea too. Like, I'm actually on board with that. I totally would support that.
Here's the other thing. Here's something I was thinking too during that time. Is there any way we've got diplomatically to lean on these countries in the area that could take them that don't? I mean, granted, their reasons for not taking them are rather hilariously ironic, because it was security concerns, which again, the left here was like, no, there's no security concerns. The Middle East is like, yeah, they kind of are. And they're like, don't listen to them. They don't know what they're talking about. So it's like, you know, but is there any way to kind of lean on, you know, countries like Saudi Arabia or like UAE, you know, to kind of, or Indonesia even, to kind of take these people, like, you know, I just thought that was at least an option, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
We're tinkering. It's like it was time to tinker.
Did we lose you, Trav?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
No, go ahead and answer that. We'll finish with that. And
yeah, I guess my general thought to these questions, I mean, and I'm guilty. I'm going to say I don't like technocratic solutions right after having given my own technocratic solution to buying a Greek island. But in general, you know, you were quoting Hayek earlier, and there's all sorts of things. There's the knowledge problem. You know, there's the fatal conceit that we understand problems. It's wonderful, and it feels like a sense of power and a sense of expertise to say, I know what needs to be done. But I suspect, you know, I always think any program that we implement is going to be implemented by our enemies, which is to say government employees and bad luck. You know, these things are always going to turn the best of intentions against you. And second of all, we may not understand the situation well. We might not understand perverse incentives. Like Alex Norash, we might not understand how it evolves 1 or 2 or 3 generations later. So my general thought about, you know, illegal immigrants is sort of the same as my thought about, you know, criminals. Maybe the best thing to do is not figure out the 73-step plan about what time they get breakfast and how many guards are there and what their nutrition should be, but, you know, exile them. You know, the 19th or 18th century, I guess not 18th century, 19th century British solution is send them to Australia. Surely we can find an Australia somewhere, or we can make an Australia by, you know, buying a bunch of land off of someone. So
no, and these are all fair. And I'll say this about a lot of the points that I come out of it that you might, where you would push back and say, I don't like this idea. I see those more as a compromise.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good
point. Between conservatives and the left. I'm like, okay, look, leftist ideas are bad, period.
Yep.
They're non-negotiable. We cannot have leftist ideas.
Yeah.
Here is something to give the left a bone.
That's
if they
a
don't
really good point.
take it or leave it. Now, if they don't want it, well, guess what? We're gonna do the whole, you know, ship them to an airlock and eject them thing. Okay, like that's the route we're going, lefties. Take it or leave it. If you don't like my plan, guess what? We're kicking them all out. All right, this is non-negotiable. All right,
nice.
We're negotiating from a position of strength. I'm doing top-down negotiation here. I will give you this. If you don't want it, fuck off. All right. Well, thanks, Travis. We really appreciate having you show. Now, I understand you've got some books on Amazon.
Yeah. Right. So I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. I'm a software engineer and a farmer and a software novelist. or excuse me, a science fiction novelist. And so
I was gonna say that'd be very tedious to read.
Right. So anyway, I've got some novels, and if you go to Amazon and search for Travis Corcoran, they are very well reviewed, finalist for the Prometheus Award for Libertarian Science Fiction, and they deal with a whole bunch of issues. Obviously, the typical science fiction stuff of artificial intelligence and uplift in space travel, but also deeply sort of political issues, things like immigration, things like the proper scope of government versus Hayekian, sort of local knowledge, and Milton Friedman, decentralized polycentric legal systems. So if you like science fiction, go to Amazon.com and search for Travis Corcoran.
And that's Corcoran for the last.
That's correct.
I gotta say, I'm really intrigued. But I might actually, when I get
outstanding
some spending money and some time to read, I might actually get this, because I actually want to write similar novels, only fantasy with like ninja pirates, but same kind of concept where like you introduce like libertarian and conservative political ideas in a kind of subtle way. So I'm really intrigued by.
I absolutely agree with subtle. Hitting people over the head in sort of an Ayn Rand sense of this is the right solution. That's tedious. So DM me. We should talk more about this. I want to see.
Oh yeah, no, this is going to be fun. All right.
I want in on that.
Yeah, make sure you guys check out his books on Amazon. I definitely will be, because this sounds very intriguing. Follow Travis at Morlock P on Twitter. Great conversations happening there. Really cool guy to follow. Really smart. I've actually said, and I kind of mean it, like one of these days I just want to take like a week-long vacation and like work on his farm for free. You laugh, but like that's not a skill set that I have, and I think that's a skill set that everybody should have. So
I'll take you up on that.
Yeah, I bet you would. free labor for until you realize like, oh shit, it's going to cost me more to fix the crap that Mike breaks. But so definitely follow him on Twitter. Make sure you're following us at ornery_opinions. Follow not gay John at Kemuri Hiryoku.
Really gonna stick with that, aren't you?
It is kind of catchy. I'm not gonna lie. I honestly think
really to who? You're
gonna have to tweet out John's handle, because I that went by too fast, and I bet it went back.
At Kemuri Hiryoku. Yeah, we always end up doing that anyway. It's a pain in the ass to spell. And I keep telling him to change it, and he doesn't. He's stubborn.
Okay. And that's why he's got 4 followers, right?
No, it stays flat at about 620 or so. It seems to like stay about there. It doesn't seem
just
to change.
Joking about the spelling. Cool.
No,
it is technically spelled like it sounds. It's just a Japanese phonetic spelling, so it's
not very different from Spanish, actually. So.
Okay.
Anyway,
all right. Well, guys, it was great being here. I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Travis. You guys have a great weekend. We will see you next week. Have a good night.